Hey, Big Jim, how are you, buddy?
Very good, thank you.
Good to see you.
And you, and
Yeah.
you. By the way, we still need to work on your microphone because there's a not an echo effect, but a hollow effect. You know,
How,
like
how
you're in a
about
room where the walls are padded and you don't get any uh, sound carrying or something like that.
now you hear it also?
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's the essence of the room. I don't know what,
let me
or it might be a setting.
it happens when I come on. Let me exit. I'll be right on.
Okay. Hey, Kevin, welcome aboard.
Hey Jim, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you, and happy birthday to your daughter.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah.
22 years old. That's awesome.
Uh,
How was that?
oh
Better?
yeah, she's yeah.
There you go. That's good. Thank you, Jay. I was just talking to Kevin. His daughter just turned 22, and he posted a bunch of pictures from over the years of him and her on Facebook. It was nice to see.
Well, happy birthday, Kevin,
Yep.
Thanks so much.
to
Thanks
your
so
daughter. To
much.
your
And
daughter.
she had a good the daughter. Yeah. So she had a good. We went up. She's in optometry school, so it's her finishing up her first year. So she had big tests. So she gave us an hour of her time last night to drive up and have dinner with her. But she said, I've got to study. So yeah. So we went and had dinner with her, and then she went back to studying. So
Cool.
Optometry, huh?
yep.
That's awesome.
By the way, the
Yeah.
other day, Jay, Kevin had a flight delay because of a cracked windshield on the uh, airplane, and instead
Oh
of
my God.
instead of waiting around for the next flight from Birmingham, he drove all the way home in a rental car. He rented a Mustang convertible and just decided to
Yeah.
chill and do it the long way. Love that idea.
Yeah. And
that's great.
yeah. Yeah, I actually rented a Malibu or a Corolla because it was the cheapest thing they had. And then when I got there, the guy was super nice, and I was telling him about my situation, and he says, "What do you want to drive?" And I said, "Well, what's my options?" And he started giving me options. He said, "I got a brand new Mustang out here. You want to take it?" And he let me have it at the same price. So yeah, so that was good customer service.
Not
That's
too bad.
Yeah,
By the way,
yeah, good
speaking
customer
of
service.
that, I got to share something with you. Remember, I talked last week about a guy named uh, John Rulin, who Giftology was his company.
yeah.
Remember that? Well, here's what arrived today. So this came FedEx, and it's just a nice black box. But what was in that black box was this beautiful black box, and you can see a little bit of the embossing here of
Yeah.
Giftology, and it's a nice texture. And when you
Hmm.
open this up, here's what you see. So there's a note to me.
Mm-hmm.
This bag, it's a leather bag
Wow.
that's pretty substantial. And in the bag is this book, hardcover,
Hmm.
Giftology. And in the front of the
Yeah.
book is this on a little leather strip. And it's sort of how the deal works. It's like instructions. And the book itself is just elegant, real nice texture. This feels like cloth. Um, and you can see on the cover, see the different types of textures and such.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
really,
yeah. Nice.
yeah. John Rulin, Giftology.
What's the book about?
The book is about the value and process of creative giving, giving focused on the impact it has on the recipient rather than giving things a promotional value or whatever. And I mean, this little bag itself is a nice nice keeper.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And don't
Yeah.
know what I'll do with that, but I do know I'm going to hang on to it. And then his note, handwritten note.
Yeah.
Thanks for investing your valuable time in the Selling Power virtual event. The book is a 90-minute read. I look forward to staying in touch. Text me and let me know you got the book. And then he had his phone number. And so I texted him, got an immediate response. And so he's in a position to stay in touch easily. He's got my contact information because he already
Yeah.
had my mailing address. But now I've texted him, so it's alive. And I'm really eager to read the book. And I know the book will give me a lot of great ideas for how to give gifts in a way that'll open relationships and doors without being directly commercial.
right.
Kind of cool.
Awesome. Very cool. I ordered the book that you recommended, Giving Yourself Away.
Yeah.
So I just got it and I've started reading the first few pages. Very interesting book.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Kevin, do you remember me mentioning that? The book is called Try Give
No.
Yourself Away. It was a long
Okay.
time. It was written by a guy named David Dunn. And it was written in
Uh-huh.
what, 1920 or 1930, something like that? 1947. And to every man, woman, and child, every man and woman who's seeking greater happiness in these troubled times. And he tells about adventures in giving.
Yeah.
There's another guy who's built a substantial following. His foundation is all around giving, and his name is Brad Formsma, Formsma, and he has a podcast. And I've forgotten the name of it, but it's basically the same thing. And it's just a way of being generous as a strategy for building an abundant life. Pretty cool.
What's his last name?
Formsma.
Formsma. Okay.
Yep. Brad. Now I want to show you, I'm going to do a screen share and I'm going to talk about well, before I do that, just a second. Unscreen share. Where do I stop this thing? Well, I'll share it and then I'll stop sharing it. Okay, stop share. There. I'm going to talk about that pipeline that Jeffrey Hayzlett designed that I sent out the other day. And
Yes.
so I'll go into that. But before I get there, I wanted to ask if you had any questions or any input that you wanted to share before I started doing that.
Well, wish me luck tomorrow. I got my Division B contest in Toastmasters. I won the club and I won the area. Now I'm going to division. So
Oh, awesome.
hopefully I'll do well.
Good for you. What's the nature? What's your presentation?
It's a contest. It's like you got to give 5 to 7 minute speech,
Yeah, I know.
whatever you want. Yeah.
That's what I mean. What's your presentation? The content that's coming from
Oh,
Jay.
it's called Boldly Go, and it's kind of a takeoff on Star Trek.
Yeah.
Boldly Go where you have never gone before, and it just tells the story of how I was, until 40, I was basically never ventured anywhere, and I sold Beanie Babies,
Yep.
and I talked about how that this Beanie Baby in 1999 was the most valuable Beanie Baby on the planet, and you can only get it in Germany.
Yep.
So I traveled to Germany without knowing anybody, without speaking the language, to find Germania so I could bring it back to the United States and sell it. Because people said, if you can find a Germania, I'll give you $500. And so I traveled across Germany with a guide going to every store looking for Germanias, and ended up ended up bringing in thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. You know, I became just a street vendor. I became basically a legitimate toy distributor, and it's a story of how I did that and the
Very
adventures.
good. What cities did you end up going to? What, your sound just went off. I don't hear you. You're muted. You must have bumped it or something.
Yeah, I did. Ralph and I got in a car. We started in Munich,
Yep.
and we went all across Germany. You know, Dusseldorf, Frankfurt.
Yep.
He just drove from town to town, hitting all the gift stores.
Isn't
And
that a beautiful, beautiful country?
it's so beautiful, and the
Stunning.
mountains and the castles, and it was.
Yeah.
And what was really funny is that like nobody in America would go to Germany to find these things because nobody spoke German, and I just jumped on a plane and did it, and like people were paying when I got back. I wholesaled these. I brought back, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of them, and I wholesaled them for between $250 to $500 each, and I paid $5 to $10 in Germany. And in Germany, the Germans hated these.
Really?
Yeah, they're used to the Steiff bears, you know, the quality bears. These
Yeah.
are beans inside here. They were like,
Yeah.
we don't want these. So the stores couldn't believe that I was willing to buy them. And I bought every one I could get, and I sold them for like, you know, crazy amounts of money. And nobody in Germany wanted them, but nobody in America would come to Germany to get them except me.
Yeah.
It was a street vendor traveling to Germany.
You're going to do that in 5 minutes, right?
7 minutes, yeah, yeah.
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 Good.
Yeah.
Well, it's a compelling story, that's for sure. By the way, quick recommendation. Go see the movie Cabrini, Cabrini, Cabrini. It's about Mother Cabrini, the nun who came from Italy to the United States back in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and formed a worldwide network of orphanages
Wow.
and hospitals. Phenomenal story, very, very strong drama, compelling. It was one of those where at the end you just sit there and go, wow. And there's a epilogue that has the true story with photographs and details, you know, because it's actors doing the show, and then after the movie they show you the real photographs of the people and give you all the details, and it just blows your mind. And then there's a musical performance by Andrea Bocelli.
Oh, he's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that in the theaters or is it on like Netflix or
Theaters. I went to a theater yesterday, but it's limited. It's one of those like the Chosen, you know, it's like that. It's where it's got limited distribution, but it's not a religious show. It's a show, you know, it's a historical movie about a religious person.
Sure, sure.
And what a great story. Really inspiring.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. I'll go see it.
Yeah. I wanted to show you something. I think both of you will appreciate this. You're talking about competing in Toastmasters. Well, I never competed in Toastmasters. I was a Toastmasters member in Tulsa for 3 months, but that was my only Toastmasters time as a member. But in the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, that was my vehicle. That's the avenue I pursued for my personal development. And I joined in 1972, ended up on their national headquarters staff in charge of leadership training for all 350,000 members. But on my way up in 1974, as a rosy-cheeked, overweight kid in Little Rock, Arkansas, I drove with some buddies to Texarkana, which is where Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana come together. And they had the 4 states leadership training seminar. And there was a speech competition, and it was called Speak Up JC. And so I entered after I got there. and I came in third place. Third place in Speak Up, 1974 JCs.
Wow.
So I've still got
Wow.
right up here next to my president of the National Speakers Association microphone.
And now
Mhm.
they invite you as the keynote speaker at Toastmasters, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's cool. Ah, all righty. Now,
And you know, Jim, one of the things I noticed, like in the way you speak and the way I see people speaking, even in NSA, and I find I do the same thing in Toastmasters, it's very stiff. You don't do that. You're very loose. You
yeah,
feel like you're talking to the audience. And in Toastmasters, I think it becomes so rigid because you got to know every word of your speech and there's no room to veer off. It's not a style that I like to do. It helps me develop my stories and figure out how to, have the hero's journey. But I don't like the rigidity of Toastmasters. It's
I
not.
agree. I totally agree. Yeah. And it may be that that's a good boot camp,
Yeah.
for a professional speaker, but if you come out of Toastmasters still being a Toastmaster instead of being a professional speaker, meaning a different effect coming from you, then I think you miss the opportunity. Because
Right.
when I speak at NSA chapters, as you saw, one of the slides I use is one that compares public speaking and professional speaking. What's the difference? And
Mhm.
one of the first differences is style.
Mm.
In public speaking, it's about the speech. In professional speaking, it's about the value of the message or the experience.
I remember the other thing you said that that professional speakers are focused on connecting with the
Yeah,
audience.
yeah,
And
that's
and
true.
I took that to heart. That's a very that one little insight could change the way a person speaks if they're thinking about connecting with the audience as opposed to how do I deliver my speech? How do I look?
Yeah,
How I'm connecting with you. That's
that same thing's true in selling. Kevin, I've had salespeople come to me and say, "Hey, uh, what do I do about call reluctance?" And my answer to them is the same as my answer when they say, "What do I do about stage fright?" Because they come from the
Mhm.
same place. And the same place and the same problem is this. You're thinking about you.
Mhm.
Stop thinking about you, think about them and the value, the way they'll use your message. And that changes the whole energy flow.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I use that in the area contest. I I just decided I'm going to connect with my audience, and I really focused on. I rewrote parts of my speech to involve the audience, to ask them questions, to like laugh with them,
Yep.
to connect, and I was competing. Of course, me and TR Coverson are always. You remember TR?
Publishing.
No, do TR Coverson, the guy.
Oh, cover. So yeah, TR, of course. Yeah.
He and I are in the same area. So every year we compete against each other to see who's going to make it out of the area.
He's a good guy.
I love TR.
Yeah.
We're best friends, but I really focused on connecting with the audience. And the one of the judges, she probably shouldn't have told me this. She said, Jay, I've been watching you speak for years. This is your best talk. You just seem personable, like you were just talking to us. And I was thinking about like that's because I took what you said and like really applied it to that one little point. Connect, connect, connect.
By the way, this is for both of you and the folks watching this later. I've been doing all the detailed planning on La Jolla, and boy, that's coming together nicely. Something I'm going to include in it, and Kevin, this is right downstairs from your room with Pauletta, right down in
Uh-huh.
the living room, our big living room. Uh,
Uh-huh.
they've got a TV that's about the size of most people's walls. That TV is
Okay.
massive. And so when we get there, I'm going to hook up my computer to it, and that'll allow us to have Zoom meetings during the meeting. So I'm going to have a couple of celebrity guests drop in by Zoom. And that will be a very cool feature. And we'll try and capture
Awesome.
those and post them so that you can see them later, Jay.
Wow.
Now I'm going to switch and do my share screen. So here it comes.
Okay.
All right. Can you see my screen? I know it's difficult for you, Kevin, because you're driving, but
I
I'll
can see it.
I'll say out loud what I'm talking about so that it doesn't create a safety problem for you. But it's Jeff
Okay.
Hayzlett's model. He developed it, and he calls it thought monetization, this model. I've done various things like this in the past, and mine were more of a mind map where, you know, your content was in the center and these were satellites around it. And the way he's got it lined out is it takes whatever your content, your message is, and looks at all the forms it can take to reach the marketplace and reach the receivers. And of course, it starts at a blog, a book, enablement tools, podcasts, speech presentations, a course that you teach, a webinar, a workshop, online academy or a course, a retreat like a mastermind event, coaching and training and consulting, building an alumni council, having a council for a specific topic or a specific role, like a CEOs or HR directors or sales managers or whatever it is you're dealing with. And then a super council is what he calls his highest level on this thing. And then he says additional content revenue can come from creating software around your model, services, hosting and emceeing, having a TV show, licensing it to others. And all of those, of course, are possible. What I like about the way Jeff has laid this out is the way he's got it in this sequence. The two horizontal and vertical dimensions are acceleration, in other words, how quickly it advances you in getting your content into the market, and the value, which is the vertical. And so it's easy to track using that graphic. But what occurs to me as I look at it is you could start anywhere on that graph. You don't have to start with a blog or a book. You could start with a super council or a retreat or a webinar, you know, podcast, wherever you want to start. It's a matter of where you've got the opportunity to get in. And you build on that as your starting point. It's like, what was it, Nito Cobain? He's got the fun quote. It's your circumstances don't determine your potential, but they do determine your starting point.
Mm.
And I like that. So you take
that's
a
good.
look, you know, whatever's closest to where you are right now with your content, you know, looking at the dream catcher or looking at your topic, Jay, and you just start thinking, okay, where's my quickest, easiest, closest to revenue opportunity? And so whatever you're thinking, you know, maybe it's a speech. And so you work on your speech and you get that signature talk down to where it's just feels like home. And then you start leveraging that and getting it out there. Every time you can speak, you do. So you just you're setting to yes. And when somebody says, hey, could you be available to speak at a grass fire in my neighborhood this afternoon? Yeah. And then you figure out how to make that work, right?
Right.
I've been doing that with podcast interviews and radio interviews ever since the beginning of COVID. I just said, if someone calls and said, would you be willing to do an interview on my podcast? My answer is yes. Now, I may not be able to justify doing your next one. But if I can fit you in somewhere along the line, I will. But if yours is a high revenue podcast or one that's going to convert into some consulting clients or something for me, yeah, I'm ready right now. This afternoon, I'll figure out a way to fit you in. So I'm saying yes to everything I can, but I'm not saying yes, I'm laying down, take me in any way you want. I'm saying yes, I will find a way to work with you. It's kind of like when my preacher, Dickie, he asked me 2 weeks ago, would I deliver the sermon on June 26th? But before he asked me, he said, I have a big request. And I said, okay, the answer is yes. Now make your request. And he said, I like that. And I said, well, it's you and me. So the answer is absolutely going to be yes. Now we just have to work out the details. And of course we did. And if you approach these other things that way, then it gives you more flexibility, I think. It's not like, hey, do you give free speeches? Yeah, under some circumstances I do. Well, what are the circumstances? We need it. No, that's not a circumstance. Circumstances, I can justify it financially and otherwise. If it's for a cause that I'm a champion of, yeah, I'll give the speech for free. I'll travel to your event, I'll do all that and speak for little or nothing because I believe in the cause. If it's for a commercial situation and you're saying, hey, we'll buy your lunch and it's great exposure, sorry, I'm further along in my career than that. I don't do that anymore. But if we can find some ways to make it work, let's do. Here's an example. And this is something all of us can learn from. I ended up over the years giving lots and lots of free speeches for nonprofits and charity groups, thinking I could somehow leverage it. But every time I agreed to do a free speech, I was treated like a person who was worth my fee. Zero. I was treated like a blue-haired stepchild, right? I was the one who wandered in off the street and wasn't going to get any respect at all. And so at those events, they give me grief over, oh man, what, you got a PowerPoint? Can't you do this without a PowerPoint? Or they'd come up to me at the last minute and say, do you really need a microphone? Well, of course not. I'll hear everything. The audience needs for me to have a microphone. I don't need a microphone. And that reframes everything. Oh my gosh, well, can't you just project? Well, yeah, for the first 5 minutes, and then my voice will be toast. So if you want them to hear the whole talk, you probably ought to find some amplification real fast. But anyway, that was, years in the past. But people would keep saying, well, you give a speech and we don't have money. It's good exposure. And I ended up doing them and they always seem to be disappointing. Now, on the other end of that same spectrum, I've had people pay me $40,000 and a round trip first class airfare to Macau, China to give a 1-hour speech. They treated me like a god. This was an Australian company and it was a multi-level marketing company. And they were having their big super producers conference in Macau. And they flew me in from California to be there and paid me literally $40,000 for a 1-hour keynote speech. Wow.
How much?
But they treated me so well, it was over the top. So what's
How
the
much
difference
they
in
pay
the
you, Dan?
two? Huh?
How much do they pay you? 40,000?
0, 3 more zeros, period. Yep. And
Nice.
it was for 60 minutes.
Awesome.
And I said, hey, I would like to play a song on guitar and sing it during my presentation. Do you have a guitar? And they said, no, but we will. And they went out and bought one. And we gave it away at the end of my speech. So, so here's the policy that I developed for the ones that don't have a fee, but you would like to give the talk. So Boys and Girls Clubs comes to you and they say, hey, we'd love to have you as the keynote speaker or as the MC or as the grand poobah of our annual fundraiser gala. Would you be willing to do that? You say, certainly, I'd love to do that for you. And then you say, my fee is X. And they say, oh, no, we don't pay fees. We're doing this to raise funds. Say, okay, where are you having it? Well, Four Seasons Hotel. Nice. Are they giving you the dinner or are you paying for that? Well, no, it's the dinner. I mean, we have to pay for that. Are they charging you for the meeting room? Uh-huh. Yeah. So other things you're paying for, but you don't have a budget for your speaker. Well, right. And so we came to you and said, well, I'll tell you what, my fee is, and let's say it's $20,000. And you say, I would like to do this for you. So what can we do to offset that $20,000? Like, well, I don't know, man, I mean, we can't give you anything. Well, how much is a platinum sponsorship? Oh, well, 25,000. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will do it. What's a gold sponsorship? 15,000. I'll do the talk for a gold sponsorship. Because a gold sponsorship means you're only going to have to give me a table for 10 people, which will cost you a few $100s, certainly not thousands. A place in your program, printed program, a banner for the wall, a slide in your slideshow, and a space in your silent auction. So that's the $15,000 gold sponsorship. I will agree to do the speaking for that sponsorship. And they say, well, it's not going to keep you from selling other gold sponsorship. Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Okay, we'll do it. Send them a contract. If you don't send them a contract, you're still getting a brother-in-law deal and you're going to be treated like one. So send them a contract, have them sign it. And if they don't send it back, call them, follow up and get it in writing and take it seriously. And, send a receipt or whatever you do when somebody pays you something. And it changes the way you're treated and it changes the whole dynamic for you. What I was doing in the past when I had a pretty active calendar was I would say to people, every year I do approximately X engagements. And at the time I'm thinking about in my head right now, I was doing about 60 engagements a year. And I typically take on about 5 more engagements of a charitable nature, which I will do pro bono, for organizations that fit the profile of my giving. And if you would like to apply to be one of those, send a letter to or an email to ... So they would basically have to sell me on doing it for them. It changes the energy so profoundly and makes it so much easier to be treated as a person of value instead of like, Bob, who had a pickup truck and decided he'd help us get the supplies.
I love it, Jim. I love it.
Yeah,
Can
good.
can I ask you a question regarding, it's something that I thought of while you were
Yeah.
talking? And this is probably the most important question I'll ever have for you. You actually create your speeches and your talks, but you must have like do you have a course or a formula that you use to create your talks? Like do you use the hero's journey? Do you map things out before you start? Do you have an outline? How do you do what you do?
Well, the answer is different for different stages in my career. Earlier in my career, it was uh, handwritten and it was stories. And I would weave the story. I had, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 stories to choose from. And if it was sales, it would be sales stories, leadership, et cetera. That would determine the mix. But I would think through who is the audience? What do they care about? Who have they heard recently? What books have they read? Where's their mind? Because when I come into it, I don't want to cover ground they've already covered. I want to be able to find my spot in there and bring value. So I would write the speech with that in mind. So it's all about reaching them in a valuable way, not in the way that Zig Ziglar reached them or somebody else, Tony Robbins reached them, recently. And then I would just put the stories on a sheet of paper and it would look, like that, just a bunch of notes to self. And that was, I'd write it out. Maybe 1/10 of the presentation was in writing on that paper. And then the night before, I would sit in my room and read over that and think through the whole talk and then change my notes to where it was only a list of the story's name. Grandma story, bill collector story, Mass Mutual story. And then I would put margin notes, but only tiny, tiny little margin notes. So when I got up to speak, if I needed to look at my notes, it was easy to just glance at them and know what the next story was. And it was easy for me when I was sitting over coffee alone to look at that and hear that speech in my mind and see it all the way through to the end. And then I started using visuals. And at first I was using a flip chart. And then I went from a flip chart to overhead projectors. Remember those with the big acetate things that you would lay on the overhead projector? And then I went to 35 millimeter slides and I would travel with a slide tray, carousel tray. And the night before my speech, I'd be in my hotel room with all the slides laying on the bed with me if they're cross-legged and all the slides out there on the bed and the tray in front of me. And I would pick up each slide and think about the flow of the speech and put them in the tray and then lock it in and be ready to go the next day. And then it went to PowerPoint. And I was interested. I was in Arizona recently speaking for NSA. And I had 3 speeches to deliver that morning. I had a 1-hour speech, 1.5, and then another 1 after that. And the first one was the sort of the following my career path and what did I learn along the way. And the second one was kind of like the one I gave at your chapter, Jay, when I talked about going pro. And then the third one was for a subgroup of my audience that were all newer members of NSA. And so I was talking about speaking careers and all the various options open to people when they choose that path. Okay. So there's 3 speeches. I'm absolutely prepared. I arrive at the meeting way in advance, grab a cup of coffee, meet the audio visual guy, get my laptop plugged in and everything. And then the guy informs me it's not just simply a plug in and play. This is being done through a Zoom call. and the Zoom client in my laptop needed an update, and the update took an hour and a half.
Ah,
So I couldn't use it. So I set it on update and set it aside and thought about my speech. And I wrote down, let me see if I can find this in my notes here. Just a second. I wrote down my speech outline for that day. I'll find it here soon. And I'll show you exactly what the speech was. Coming up, pardon the delay, here it is. Okay. This is my speech.
mhm.
The first hour. Be an expert, sustain a career, the arch of my career. And then the little notes mean Little Rock Housing Authority, Earl Nightingale, JC's, Nightingale Conant Tapes, USJC's, NSA 1976, the year I joined, moving to California, being NSA president, writing 16 books, being semi-retired, going to China, COVID, the world changed, becoming a mentor more than a keynoter, 25 books, and then starting the Wisdom Parlor podcast. So that's what my notes were. I laid them down on the table in front of me, no slides, 10 minutes to prepare this.
Wow.
So I'm in a nervous state. You know, when I get to a meeting, first thing I want to do is get the technology plugged in and then chill.
Yeah.
But 4 times out of 10, it's still some technical glitch that couldn't have been foreseen. You know, oh no, your Android, well, we're at, you know, oh my God, no, you know, and everybody's running around like crazy. And all I want to do is just plug in so I can greet the people and be an appropriate guest speaker. Not happening. So I have to worry over the little details. Well, this one, I finally said, to heck with it. I'm just going to give the talk. Here it is. So basically, I've got 3 notes: be an expert, sustain a career, the arch of my career. All those little scribble notes are the details of the arch of my career.
Mm.
And so that was the speech. What were you saying, Kevin?
I was coughing. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So when I look at that, I say I was in 1972, I was working for the Little Rock Housing Authority. See that LHRA now, or LRHA?
Yeah.
Little Rock Housing Authority. And heard Earl Nightingale on the radio, you know, and I tell that whole story. But that was my speech. This was my audience. And you can see I've got a slide up there on the screen, but it's not my slide. That's
Right.
the slide of the meeting planner. And this is the rest of the audience. So it's a good sized group. And there's the AV guy way in the back. And then this is me. See the yellow circle? That's me and the AV guy just before the speech, trying to work out all those details while everybody else is mixing and mingling. And then that's Nikki Haley. That's a different thing. Okay, but anyway, that was, you know, that's the way.
Little margin notes are basically leads you along the path of your career, the trajectory, which is covered by the top bullet point. So every one of those lines is the name of a story. So you know the story of each one, and
Yep.
the little things are detailed. So
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how do you create a story? Like, what is your technique to, because you can't just,
Well, that's it. Okay, speech is here.
yeah,
Story is here, right?
right, right.
So creating a story is a different discussion, but let's stick with this one for a minute. When I did that for the first hour, and then we took a break, and lo and behold, the update had completed. So I was able to log on to the Zoom and able to use my AV for the second part of the seminar, which was an hour and a half. Perfect. That went really well. We broke for lunch, and then we got together with that subgroup of newer speakers, and I did a presentation for them. And for them, I didn't need slides, you know, because I was just basically talking about how do you do this business? And I entertained a lot of questions. But I did the better part of 3 hours of talking that day, 3.5, and had an AV disaster in the first part. But one of the guys in the audience came up, and he was a guy who'd been a member of NSA since it began. He said, that's the best presentation I've ever heard at this chapter.
Wow.
And that's big time praise.
Yeah.
And he said, we should talk. And so he and I had several post-meeting discussions over Zoom. But that's thinking about the speaking. Okay.
Beautiful.
Let's go
Beautiful.
back to the screen share on that graphic. Okay. I'm going to skip back to where we were and go to the I've forgotten what thought leadership, whatever Jeff Hayzlett called that thing. Let's see, scroll back here and get him up on the screen. Now I've misplaced it. There it is. Good. Thought monetization. That's what it is. Okay. So I think for you, all of you who subscribe to this, that this ought to be a shopping list. And you ought to keep it somewhere handy so that you can look at it easily when you're thinking about your other things and say, okay, what else on this little staircase could be combined with this with almost no extra effort and increase the impact or the profitability of it or the reach. So if you say, I want to hold a retreat, then you say, okay, where am I going to hold a retreat? Downtown New York City, Manhattan. Whoa. Okay, where are you going to hold it? I don't know. Algonquin Hotel. Because the Algonquin Round Table was a, unique thing, and I'll do something kind of spinning off of that idea. Great. Okay, what's good about the Algonquin? Well, it's got history, it's got atmosphere, and it's got the bar association right across the street. And if I have any clients that are attorneys, that's easy for them. And so we can do that connection. What else? Now, maybe I should make this not just a retreat, but also a podcast in the middle of the retreat from the site. And maybe give people a portion of the retreat that they could attend as a webinar for a smaller fee, knowing it's going to be remote for them. And then I'll structure the retreat so that it becomes a course I can teach after. And I'll use that as a model in my coaching and training and consulting. So when a company brings me in, I'll sell them that course as the beginning of the consulting assignment. You see what I'm doing here, thinking out loud? I'm just looking for any way to take all these things and morph them together. The book becomes, well, like my first book on selling wasn't a book. It was a seminar handout, a bunch of loose leaf pages called Professional Selling. And there were, there was a page on prospecting. There was a page on putting together a presentation. There was a page on getting referrals, a page on this, that, and the other. Well, a few years later, a guy called me and he said, Jim, I do training movies where we videotape people. One of his clients was Tom Hopkins, and he had video recorded Tom Hopkins doing seminars in a TV studio with a studio audience. And then they took Tom's handouts and made a handbook to go along with the video series. And they were selling these on video cassettes in a library. So it was like the Earl Nightingale cassettes that I bought, audio cassettes, but this was video. and a company would buy it, not an individual. And it sold for like $14,000 or something long ago. And that guy, so he came to me and he said, I want to do this with you. And I said, well, cool. What are we going to do it on? He said, on relationship selling, on your, excuse me, he didn't use that term, on professional selling, your version of sales. So we collaborated on it, and I ended up titling it Selling to Win. Selling, TWO, win. In other words, win-win selling, but not win-win, because everybody at the time was using that term, and I didn't want to be yet another. So I came out with Selling to Win. And so that worked both ways. And we put it together as a handbook. And I've still got one of those old handbooks. Well, when it came time to go from that video series to another product, the product I wanted was a book. So I gave the handbook to a publisher, and he said, here's what I need you to do to this handbook so we can make it into a book. And I published the book. And he was a custom publisher, so I had to pay for part of it, but he got me into the bookstores and did the other part. And then I went around everywhere I could in La Jolla. I lived in La Jolla at the time, and set up promotions for my book. And the main bookstore in La Jolla is a place called Warwick's. And Warwick's had all the big authors on tour, you know, the politicians and the movie stars and the famous people, and the James Patterson and Robert Ludlum and people like that. You know, they'd come in and they'd have a book signing at Warwick's. Well, Warwick's was 3 blocks from my office. So I went over there and talked to the people. And I said, I've got my first book, it's coming out. It's a big deal. It's really, really special to me. It's called Relationship Selling. And they said, tell you what, we will put your book in our front window. I said, I'd like to upgrade that. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I want you to give me the entire front window for only my book for, I've forgotten how long it was, like 2 weeks. And they said, well, we could never do that. And I used my best persuasion, and they said yes.
Wow.
And on the day of, I brought boxes and boxes of my books over to the bookstore and stacked them up in the window in a big elaborate display that made it look like we just got a trainload of this wonderful new book. So if you're walking by, please come in and buy one. And so it's all there, and a picture of me, you know, a big picture of me and all these things. And every day I would send a guy from my staff over to the bookstore to take about 25 books out of the window and bring them back to our inventory. By the way, the inventory at the bookstore was 0. So they had 0 out of pocket. All they had to do was give me use of their window. And so every day, this inventory is shrinking. And it was shrinking in a way that intentionally made it look a little bit sloppy, like people had been coming in and grabbing bargain basement, you know, Philo's basement buying frenzy. And by the end of the period, it was down to just a few books left in the window. And then I came to the store and did a presentation and did book signing. So it was just a little tactic to sell a few books, and it sold quite a few, but I'm not a truckload by any means.
I love it.
But that was a fun thing to do. But that book also became my textbook for my classes. Translation: if I'm speaking in a company, I expect all of the people in that company to have a copy of the textbook, because if they're taking a course in relationship selling, this is the textbook.
Right.
So I thought about it that way, which caused me to repackage my fees. So it would not be a fee plus books. It would be a fee of a little bit more, including books, to X number of books. Well, we don't have that many people. That's okay. You get that many books anyway. Here's what I suggest you do with those other books. Give them to your suppliers, give them to your best customers, give them to people that you want to do something nice for, and put your own company imprint inside the cover. And they said, great idea. And so they began to prospect for me. So I was always eager to give people more books than they were paying for, so that they would then feel compelled to give those books away to get themselves some points with the people they cared about. And so all of these things fit together. And then I needed an audio album because everybody was buying audio cassette albums at the time. So I went into a studio in San Diego and I recorded 12 messages, because I had 6 cassettes, and a message was one side of the cassette and another message on the other. And that was the companion piece to the books. So if a company hired me, they're paying me a speaking fee and expenses. They're paying a flat stipend for books up to certain numbers. It changed depending on quantity. And then for the book was for everybody. The audio albums for each department. If the company had 10 departments, they get 10 audio albums. But if they had 100 employees, they get 100 books, 10 audio albums, 1 speech. Okay. And when I did videos later, they get 1 video set for the whole company, unless it's dispersed around the country, in which case 1 for each physical location. And then they would get the audio for each department. And then they would get, because the audios, you'd hear it and then you'd pass it on. And then the book, of course, would be for each person. And then I took my content from the book, and you could take it 1 page at a time, and it's an article for a magazine. And so I kept those in a separate file, digital file, where at first it was printed, but later digital, where I could tell the company, since we've signed up for this training, you get an article from me for your company newsletter every week. And so they get 52 sales messages from Jim that are short enough to read quickly, and they put that into their pipeline. And then that would lead to something like Oklahoma Real Estate, Oklahoma Bankers Association, OBA. They hired me to give a speech for the women's division. I did it. It went well. That led to the men's young presidents division, and then the sales and marketing division. And so I did 27 talks for the Oklahoma Bankers Association in about a 3 or 4 year period. And they said early on, would you be willing to write an article for our magazine, the Oklahoma Banker? And I did, and it became popular. And so every month when that magazine came out, I had an article in it. And that article reached more than the Oklahoma Bankers, because every bankers association in the country was sharing their magazine with the other major bankers associations throughout the country. So the people in the New York bankers and the Illinois bankers and the Texas bankers were reading my articles too and saying, hey, could we republish this in ours? And all of these led to speaking engagements. And those led to consulting assignments. And so, all of this works together. When you think of it like that, you think of this as like a tree with a full root system instead of just a stack in a closet.
Right.
So it's dynamic and alive.
I love it. Everything builds on each other.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And Kevin, you got any particular comments or questions?
No, I love it. I see exactly what you're doing there.
Okay, no, good. Well, I've got this recorded, and so I will leave this alone and not do what I did a few weeks ago, which I'm still kicking myself for closing Zoom prematurely, and it didn't preserve the recording.
Oh, no, oh, no.
My bad.
So Jim,
And that was a
just-
really good session too. You were there, Jay.
yeah, I'm in all your sessions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, any last questions or
Yeah,
comments?
just the earlier question I had, and if you can refer me, because you have a gift for telling stories.
Thank
And
you.
that's kind of, you're welcome. And that's at the NSA meeting that I attended where I saw you for the first time. And you talked about China, and you talked about the bodyguard that was like, would die for you. I
Yeah,
was entranced by that whole story. And I
thank you.
thought, yeah, how does he create a story? What's in his mind? Because stories don't just come, anybody can try to tell a story, but to do one successfully takes skill.
That's true. Yeah.
What rules do you follow in your mind? What
Well, I
tactics?
think we probably ought to focus one of these sessions
Yeah.
just on stories.
I would love that.
I can give you some quick answers. There's a book called Story Selling. I may have it here. If so, I'll get the author's name for you. I don't see it right now, but it's a fairly recent book, and it's a good book, Story Selling.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, Jay, you just done that when you told us your story about the bear.
yeah,
I mean, so when I hear Jim speak, I do that as well. So I mean, everybody remembers me for my stories when I speak. Just Jim, exactly what you said is how I do it. I'll have a point and I'll have the Macy's story. I'll have a point and this exactly the way you described it. But those stories are just things you've lived, and they just come out. I mean, Jay, when you the story about the Bears, that was a story. I mean, you just told us your story. Hey, I went to Germany and nobody was doing it, and I've done this and I brought them back. I mean, it just has to be natural. I think the thing with a story, it has to be natural.
that's true. Now, I did do a specific video on how to tell stories, and it's in the course that you are a subscriber to, the Professional
okay.
Presentations 28-part course.
Beautiful.
I did one that was only on the subject of, no, I did two on stories. One of them is about my signature stories, the Acorn Principle story, the grandma story, the bill collector story, where I tell the story and then I take it apart.
Yeah.
And another one is where I make up a story on camera with no script. And I'm just pulling it out of the air and telling a story right on the spot. And then the production people went in and dropped in visuals behind it afterwards that made it look like I had thought it through in advance, but I hadn't. But that's in there. So,
Good. That totally answers my question. Now I know
Cool.
you've actually done this. I'm gonna get to. I'm still doing there's so much stuff that you've given us. I'm going through it all, but I have something to look forward to. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. And by the way, I still need to fill those last 6 spots in La Jolla. So anyone that you know of that I ought to be talking with, please put me in touch with them or them in touch with me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jim.
I appreciate you being here.
I love the opportunity to get to see how your mind works and hear your stories. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Back at you. Okay.
Okay, buddy. Bye.
Have a good Easter weekend.
You too. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.